You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
وتكلم من هناك لشوارزنيجر
Va a pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
And welcome to Soccer Today. It's a short turnover today from our show last night, which was a blockbuster show with two great interviews, including all-time Canadian cap leader Julian de Guzman. So that was a pretty good interview that I think Kevin enjoyed and I enjoyed. Certainly,
I'm even willing to mention right live on the air that I think it's our best work ever. Yesterday's 20-minute with Julian de Guzman, for me, has been a pleasure. I thank you once again, Julian. And if you have not listened to the interview, I urge you to go listen to it after the live show. And after you've done listening to our expansion special, listen to Julian talk about his career. A lot of emotion in the interview and worth a listen.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm working on, as I said in the show yesterday, we're going to, Kevin and I, look at each of the expansion bids today, give a pro and a con, sort of predict who we think the four teams to evolve from this will be. And then over the next couple weeks, we're going to bring on guests from each of these markets. I'm working on a Tampa Bay guest for some time soon. That will probably be our first one off the hop. We'll just move through it from there. As Kevin said, it was a good interview. Julian showed some emotion in the interview. He was candid about his time in Spain and his time coming back to Toronto and things like that. And, just a, fun interview. If you like Canadian soccer, you like North American soccer, you'll want to listen to that. Player interviews can sometimes be not great because they hold back a little bit. But I think in this particular case, when they've just retired, it's often when you're going to get the best stuff out of them. So I will encourage you to listen to that. And I still am committed to getting that best of Soccer Today out on Sundays. It's been a little crazy the last couple of weeks, but maybe I'll start with that one on this Sunday. At least, at the very least, maybe we'll put that interview out on its own. We'll isolate it or something.
Yeah, we can do something about that. But, we've talked about it briefly yesterday with Evan Ream, with what happened in Sacramento. And before we talk about the 12 expansion, I just want to mention a quick little note that was mentioned by the mayor of Sacramento, Darrell Steinberg, yesterday for immediate release. On Wednesday, February 1st, Mayor Steinberg released the following statement. I am not going to allow a private business dispute to get in the way of Sacramento getting what it deserves, a Major League Soccer franchise. I am asking the parties to meet with me at City Hall to immediately resolve all remaining issues. The city's interests come first.
Yeah, that's the right thing to say. It is such an odd situation. We talked to Evan Ray. We shouldn't discount the material that Evan gave us yesterday, a regular on this show, and that's also worthwhile listening to. Look, let's just jump in because what I was planning to do was go west to east. Usually go east to west, so I thought I'd go west to east today on the expansion bids. And the most westernly city in this expansion process is Sacramento. Now, up until yesterday, we would have said the Sacramento Republic were the most Western team in this process. So the way we're going to do this is Kevin and I will each give a pro, and then we'll each give a con of the bid, and then we'll sort of just summarize it and then move on to the next city. So obviously, when we're talking about Sacramento, and I suspect that both of our cons in this case, although I don't want to speak for you, but I know mine's going to be, is just this political mess that has evolved in the last couple of days. And it's easy to say, we're going to work together. We're going to get this bid together. And MLS did say that did confirm that there were two separate groups at play here, and that this Sacramento Soccer Holdings Incorporated group is separate from the Republic. The Republic owner, Nagel, did come out yesterday and said he wanted to, quote, unquote, keep the name. He didn't say anything about working with the ownership group. He just wanted to keep the name, which makes sense. Why wouldn't you want to keep the name? There's some brand recognition there. But obviously, if we're going to have this kind of turmoil, and combined with the size of the market, which is bigger than we think, but I don't think it's as sexy as we think. So not the size so much, the sexiness of the market is what the con of Sacramento is. Kevin, do you want to? I said I'd start with pro, but we'll start with con in this particular case. So what are the cons in your mind of Sacramento?
The dispute for the eventual ownership, because yes, SAC Soccer and Entertainment Holdings have been trying to buy the Sacramento Republic FC, not being able to argue with the price. Then the SRFC being left out of the ownership bid, and now the ramification of this since Monday, we have seen. That does put a damper on the bid, in my opinion, for MLS. If you have the different opportunities, different options, and there's a dispute as one, as experienced as the bid is, because of the experience in the USL in Sacramento since 2012, you do have some experience of how they would manage and how they would exploit a franchise of MLS. But because of the dispute that's happening in very bad timing, let's just put it this way, probably the worst timing you could have, it would be right now. It doesn't look good. The MLS is going to sit down and meet with the potential owners that they see fit in the next few weeks and months. So it does not bode well because of this. And my pro, though, Duane, is they have a stadium plan in place, and that is very important. Other bids in that process right now do not have some stadium plan in place, or stadium, or even a site. Some of them have a site, some of them have a stadium plan but not found the site yet. They have a few different options. Here Sacramento have not only the site, but they have everything in place that they could launch the building very fast. So that is kind of important in that bid. But again, that the con in this bid is so not good because of the timing, that I think it takes like 45% off my prediction that I would give Sacramento. You take 80 minus 40, I would give a 45% chance, something like that right now, of Sacramento being one of those top 4 teams.
Yeah, look, I think that the stadium is correct and to call that the stadium plan, I should say, right now. They haven't started to build it yet, but they have sort of all the provisions in place to get the shovel in the ground pretty quickly. This isn't like a DC United situation where, the stadiums have been about to go in the ground for 10 years running. This is a situation where I think it'll be up and running the second that they announce it. Now, that is a good thing. It's attached to the SAC Soccer Holdings people rather than the Republic. This is what the essence of the dispute is that I think that the Nagel and those guys are the money, and I don't think that the Republic are necessarily going to be the same business or financial partners, and they probably feel at this particular time that that a lot of the malcontents will get over themselves when the situation arises. And I don't necessarily, I'm not being dismissive of their concerns, the fans there that are hardcore Republic fans, and there will be some that will stay away for sure. But he's not wrong if he believes that the majority, as Evan said yesterday, probably won't. And that's something I think that when you're talking about the supporters groups and hardcore fans, they sometimes lose sight of that they are a minority. But nonetheless, it is a mess, and it might ultimately cause this bid to lose out. You said 45%. I guess we'll give a percentage on these. I'm actually going to go lower. I still think it's a decent chance. I'd put it more at 25% now. I might have put it closer to 33% because I was never quite as high on the slam dunkedness of Sacramento. I think it's made another word up there. But anyways, the slam dunkedness of Sacramento was never quite the same for me. But I'm going to give them at about a quarter, 1 in 4 chance, which is still decent, I think. And if they go to another 4 expansion after this, which we all think they probably will, then I would give them closer to a 75% chance of being in that 32 range that they're in. All right, Kevin, let's move south and a little bit east and go to talk about San Diego. I'll let you jump in first. What would your pro for San Diego be?
Right, my pro San Diego is the fact that the city itself has lost the Chargers. They're moving to LA, even though LA doesn't want them. Chargers are gone, and what does that create is a vacuum, a void of a top tier sports franchise in this city. You have your San Diego Gulls in the AHL. You do have other lower division sports franchise in the city, but there's not a major league quote unquote team, baseball or well, I'm actually it's not true. The Padres, but see how the Padres are relevant? They're not. I even forgot they existed. But San Diego in itself would need maybe a push, and the timing might be just right with the Mexican potential owners as well involved, mixed with a team in Tijuana or close to it, or a working relationship. You can kill two birds with one stone, having a team in San Diego to represent a certain part of the population, and you mix in as well the Mexican fans. You bring a Chicharito to San Diego, and guess what? We have a party, and that's something that could be possible. And the ownership group, some partners of the San Diego Padres and other of the high businesses, they have the money. There's a proposal for a 30,000 seat stadium to be shared with SDSU, like we mentioned last week, that where would take place of Qualcomm Stadium, where the Chargers have played. But we'll see if the feasibility of it. It's still, when you're looking at the stadium plan here in this bid, takes a lot of work. You're talking about a demolishment of the Qualcomm Stadium. Then you have to make the site ready, and then you have to start building that 30,000 seat stadium to be shared with SDSU as a soccer and football facility.
Yeah, look, when I'm talking about the pros of San Diego, I think that, it's a beautiful city. It's a big market. It's a market that is associated with pro sports in the United States. I think that it gives some, unlike Sacramento, and again, this isn't fair because Sacramento is bigger than we think, but it just doesn't have the same major league feel to it that San Diego does. I think that they probably do want to go into one of those two California places. As you said, the Chargers left. That's a very similar situation to the Supersonics leaving Seattle just before the Sounders came in, and the Sounders being able to take advantage of that gap in the market, of that vacuum, as you say, and go in and sort of excel immediately as they did. So there's a potential there. Now, you mentioned in terms of a con, the stadium situation being a little bit, it's there's this plan, but there's a lot of work that would have to go into it. There's been a lot of battles over stadiums in San Diego, which ultimately led to the demise of the Chargers to move north up the highway to LA. So
quickly, Duane, sorry to interrupt, but when we mentioned the four, there's a time gap between 2 and 2, right? So if you're talking about the first two, San Diego, just because of that stadium situation, we'll have to demolish and then build. I don't think it's even feasible to have them in the first two. I don't think it's even a good idea to do so, because you're going to have to make them play in a temporary situation, and that's never good. When you want to launch something big, do like Atlanta, launch it big. When everything's ready, boom, you start, and boom, it's going to be grandiose. I think that's the way to go, and San Diego can't do that because of that stadium situation, especially if they're one of the first two teams.
Yeah, you mentioned the intriguing possibility of a big-name Mexican DP suiting up in San Diego and sort of reversing that flow of fans north of the border rather than south of the border right now, where they go for Tijuana. An issue with that is a team in the market, even though they're not Major League Soccer. They do sort of dominate the market's fans right now in terms of what they support, and it makes sense. You zip across the border, but then again, that border could be much more difficult to zip across in the days ahead, and not to get political about it, but the reality is that's there. So that is maybe a pro and a con, because there clearly are soccer fans in the area. They do go down there and fill the stadium up for the Zulus, part of them, and if they were to make it more difficult to cross the border, make it more precarious to cross the border, then they're going to need something to fill that void. So I'd say that is a pro and a con, the Mech were there. In terms of a percentage, I give them a higher percentage than Sacramento right now. I would say San Diego has a 40% chance of getting one of these first two spots, and maybe even an 80% chance, a 90% chance, I think, of getting a team ultimately if they go beyond that.
I'm going with 30% in this case because of the following phrase: ownership. Stupid. And here, the ownership group it'll be fine. But out of the 12, I think there's some of them that are more appealing if you put yourself in MLS's shoes, if such a thing can be done. So for me, I give them 30%.
All right, let's move a little bit north and a little bit east to Phoenix. This one, the Phoenix Rising FC, the USL club submitted its application there the other day. This is one of the ones that we haven't talked a lot about. It's coached by Frank Yallop, to give you a little Canadian content there if you want. The ownership group's headed by Blake Bickay and includes a group of investors who purchased Arizona United back in 2016. There's a whole bunch of names there that have some money behind it. There's a lot of support from 45 business and political leaders, but Phoenix is not one that we're really necessarily looking at a lot. Pros, Kevin. What are your pros on Phoenix? Pros and cons.
My pros for Phoenix to start is the owners. They have a plan for climate controlled, which we talked about. You kind of have to because of the harsh, very hot and almost unplayable summer weather. The owners have a plan for a climate controlled stadium on a 45-acre site that is already under contract, and that is important. Phoenix rising, literally rising out of the ashes of Arizona United to give a different feel. It does not draw well in the first season in the USL, but we're talking about totally different. I think I have a theory that's brewing in my mind where success in the USL can but cannot necessarily be transferable to a MLS franchise. If you it's how you approach it and how you sell your product. And once you're part of MLS, the way you sell your product is totally different than it was before. Hence the different buzz, the different crowd generating anticipation and literally just a atmosphere that's been created in the city to welcome a team like it's MLS. It would be very different. And I think Phoenix is not necessarily a dark horse for me, but I think it's a better bid than we know right now. It would geographically fill a spot that it's not necessarily been represented right now, and it would in theory make a stopgap for some teams that don't necessarily have rival in the same region as well. So I think that could be very interesting for Phoenix, and I do think it's a better bid than we give it credit for.
Yeah, Phoenix, when it comes down to what the pros of the bid, it's size. That is a big market.
It's the biggest market. It's the biggest market out of the 12, by the way.
Yeah, it is a very big market that would fill a very big TV need in a region that is, if you consider that Southwest, obviously California being a bit of a difference, the Southwest is vastly underrepresented right now. In fact, it's not represented right now, really. So that would be a very big check in their mark. Now, the con is that I think this is a relatively new effort to bring top flight soccer to Phoenix. It's something that we haven't heard a lot of moving forward. That is a con right now. This might be a 27-28 bid that is successful rather than a 26 or 5-6 bid, but nonetheless, it's something that or whatever. I forgot what numbers we're at right now. It's so it mixes me up. But nonetheless,
yeah, this is the third we're doing. But for me, my percentage for Phoenix will be 50% because I do feel that there's a lot of willingness on MLS's part because of the size of the market to make it happen. Maybe not the first two, but maybe in the next two, which would be in the four. So for those reasons, I give a percentage of like a grade. Let's put it this way. It's like a grade that we give the bid. I will give 50%.
Yeah, look, a lot of people think that they're going to award by mark or by region, right? So California will get a team, the Southwest will get a team, the Midwest will get a team, the East will get a team, and then they'll throw another one in there somewhere else, probably Florida, the South, they'll call it probably a team as well. If that's the case, then really it depends on where you consider the next team we're going to talk about, the next country or city we're going to talk about, San Antonio. It depends on whether you consider them Southwest or not, whether or not there's any competition for Phoenix at all. I agree in terms of the percentage. This is a better option. I'm almost certain that Phoenix will have a team eventually. So I'm going to give them like 99% chance of getting an eventual team. I'm going to give them something like a 25% chance to get a team in the first round of two, because I do think that this is a relatively new bid and they may need some more time to establish that market. But nonetheless, as we said, it's just the market size. And a lot of what MLS is looking at is market size right now to get that TV footprint bigger. That's what's going to drive their numbers moving forward. Right now, that's their biggest area of growth is TV and media numbers, and they're dying there. And if they can get into major markets, that's a better way to improve it. All right.
Now we're going to San Antonio.
Let's move into that tech.
Sorry, Duane,
the San Antonio bid.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the San Antonio bid, the Texas bid, is that Southwest? I'm not sure. Kevin, go ahead. Tell us why you like San Antonio.
I like San Antonio because of, ownership, Spurs Sports and Entertainment, one of the best managed financial team in the NBA is the Spurs. what they have done with continuity, if you just look at their coach situation and their roster, the way they managed this over the year, yes, it's just an example. But if you bring this to Major League Soccer, that's exactly what is needed. You can build a viable franchise financially. The Spurs are not trying to be the Lakers. The Spurs are not trying to be the Knicks or the Bulls. They're not trying to grow outside their markets without a footprint all across the. They have what's called self-awareness about their business, and they're doing what they need to do to generate a profit in a viable, sustainable fashion. And that is so important when you're going to decide who's going to have a franchise and who's going to run it properly. If you're the other owners, because there's the one who's going to decide with the Commissioner Garber, if you look at this bid and you're like, okay, what's their track record? What they have done before? And you're an owner, you give a part of, you literally give somebody liability. So what are you going to do with my liability? You're going to manage it well? If you do so, yeah, well, you know what? For me, you're going to have a franchise, because that's the one thing that is really important in sports and in reality and in this business is, can you manage my money properly? And I think San Antonio checks that box with honors. And I do feel San Antonio is a great bid with the stadium proposal, the whole training facility that's already existing that you can transform into the Spurs training facility for soccer, the branding, the existing fan base, just a newsletter, email list that they have. They can send and sell season tickets in the blue. There's a lot of positive in San Antonio, in my opinion. I give them a 75% chance.
So it's about the ownership stupid. Yeah, that is our catchphrase of this expansion bid. Look, there's a lot going on there. The con is the market size, in terms of in the market sexiness, as I said, sort of the same Sacramento. Again, although like Sacramento, it's bigger than we think. It is a decent sized market. It's just not a massive size market. Look, yeah, I can't really disagree with much of you said that. I think that the Spurs ownership has been pretty decent. To give them a chance in the first four, I'd give them closer to 50%. In the first two, I think that they might be some markets that they want in a little bit worse in the first two. So I'm going to go lower. So I'm almost going to go something that doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm going to give them a 10% chance to get one of the first two spots, but 50% chance to get one of the next two spots. I do think that it's a really good look for them, but not necessarily going to be one of the priority markets to get in immediately. All right, two more before we take a quick break and then sort of go west. So we'll go with the start of the Midwest markets here, and the most westernly of those Midwest markets, I can't talk today, Kevin, is St. Louis. And I'll just start here. St. Louis is a market that I've talked a lot about in the days. It's a historic market in terms of soccer in the United States. It is the most historic market in many ways in terms of the history of the game in the United States. It's a market that they wanted badly in at the beginning. By all accounts, they should have been a 96er team. It just has never worked out in terms of the stadium or any of the situations around that. There still are questions about St. Louis in terms of how they're going to get that stadium built. The ownership to me is still not completely, set, but nonetheless, it is a very desirable market for MLS. It just doesn't really have the check marks other than that. If it wasn't St. Louis, if there was any other name behind this bid, I wouldn't give them much of a chance at all.
Yeah,
your thoughts?
I very agree with you. I think what drives our thought on this bid is the potential it could have, but it doesn't right now. If you look at the ownership group, I'm not even going to name, because it's a lot of founders and partners of St. Louis FC, advisors at Bain Capital, managing director of Van Edge Partner, which is a partner owner of the Boston Celtics, but it's not the owner of the Celtics. A lot of different venture capitalists are part of that ownership group. It's not one entity. It's not something that has a lot of track record outside this St. Louis FC team, and it would become St. Louis SC. And we all seen the letter a few weeks ago that it would say you would have the MLS All-Star game 5 years down the road if you're one of the bids. So that probably drove the bidding here. Hopefully, for me, I give 50% just out of the blue, because it is, for me, the aspect of St. Louis having a team that is appealing. But it's not the owners of the Cardinal. It's not the former owners of the Rams, or it's the same owners that just moved. But it's not that possibility. It is more based on the St. Louis FC. And yes, they have been successful. They have had some success with crowds, but we're not talking about a Cincinnati with 28,000 crowds at some point and 17 average. No. So for those reasons, I give St. Louis 50%. And the majority of that 50% is still in question because it is the potential stadium, not necessarily in stone. Like it's meant to be near Union Station, but land hasn't been bought and it's not official. So for those reasons, because of the ownership, it's not the best potential owners behind it. It's not the Cardinals owners or something similar to that. So for those reasons, I do feel that it has 50%, but that number could go down.
Yeah, a 50-50 is a good way to put it, but I'd say that 50% chance of them not getting the franchise is a little more extreme than some of the other 50-50s that we might put out there. And I do think that and we'll talk about a couple other bids in the Midwest in a minute, starting with Nashville next. But I do think that whoever emerges from the larger centers in the Midwest with the best bid will be the team that takes advantage of that 50% positive the most. And there's another city that I'll get to when I get to that I have in mind for that one. St. Louis, as I said, they want in, but they've never just found the right circumstances to get in. And MLS is at a stage in its development right now where they want these desirable markets, but I don't think that they feel desperate to get into them like they might have 10 years ago or so. And this isn't a situation where, a Jeff Cooper, if there's a name from the past, if people that have been listening for a while can step up and pretend he has money and use mirrors to convince people he has money. And he didn't even convince them back in the day, but nonetheless, they need to have more solid money. It's about the ownership, stupid. That is what I'm saying with St. Louis. So we'll go with 50-50, but the 50% con is maybe a little bit higher than otherwise.
I have to agree.
Final one in this block before we take a quick little break and move east will be Nashville. And this is a maybe the longest shot of all to me anyway. There's not a lot of details out there for me to put my teeth into. It is kind of a fun city. It's a city I've never been, but I've heard. Sorry, that's a lie. I've been in Nashville, but it was for like 40 seconds. I've never really been to Nashville, and I've heard it's a fun city and it's a place that's vibrant and it's kind of got that youth culture that you like. So that's kind of your pro. Yeah. That there's a lot of excitement around it. And you look at Smash Mouth hockey with the Predators and all that, and sort of how they managed to sort of bring a non-traditional sport into that market and make it fairly successful. I would think of I don't know if you call Nashville Southern, but it kind of is, of the Southern U.S. hockey markets. It's kind of been one of the more successful ones for me. I think there's potential there, but working, Kevin. But there's a lot of ifs in this bid.
And not just the success of the Nashville Predators. I think the success of the Tennessee Titans have gone a long way. Before the Titans moved to town, Nashville was not known as a sports city at all, and things have changed in the last 2 decades. If you're looking at the ownership group, John Ingram, chairman of Ingram Industries Incorporated board of directors, and Bill Haggerty, former commissioner of economic development for Tennessee, you might seem small, like 2 ownership group, but the net worth of Ingram's family is more than $4 billion. So in a way, it's not a concern. The concern is the light details, and a lot of details on the stadium plan, which near Nashville Fairgrounds, and that's where Ingram hopes to build a 25,000 seat stadium downtown. That would be interesting. You go have a little beer, you go listen to live music, and you go down the street and you go watch the Nashville FC. That's a possibility. But because of these stadium plans that are really just an idea and a hope, like it is mentioned here, I do give Nashville only a 25% grade on the bid because of the timing of it. In the next 8 years, it might be very different, but I think it's a bid that started to take shape, and for that to happen, it won't be in the first 2 because there's a lot of better and bigger candidate. Nashville being one of the smallest, if not the smallest, region in this 12-city bid. So for those reasons, I do feel there's some pros in Nashville. The city's demonstration that it can support some sports franchises is important, but still there may be a few years away, and for this reason only, I give him a 25% grade here.
Yeah, I'm going to go even lower than that. I'm going to say that they have a 5% chance of getting an initial bid and maybe 10% for the next 2. That said, I mentioned it off the top. Going to a Predators game is on my bucket list. I've heard that it's a blast to go down there, and the fans are great, and it's just a fun atmosphere. I think that if you were to get an MLS team in Nashville, that it would be a great road trip for a lot of teams, a lot of fans down there to get there. So that's I'm just being selfish when I put that there. So it's 80% in my desire column. I would love to have Nashville in the league because I've always wanted to have a time down there, and I'd rather go watch TFC play than the Caps or the Leafs, but nonetheless, that's where I'm at with that. Kevin, let's take a break. We'll come back and we'll wrap up with the Eastern more teams.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Let's just jump right in. The Indy 11 are the next up in terms of our west to east fight, Kevin. Indy 11 came out of the blue in terms of their bid. It's not surprising. It's a great soccer market. It's proven to be, but is it a big enough soccer market? That is the question.
That is the question as well. When you're looking at the stadium plans, though, because of Indianapolis, the stadium plan, the owners behind it, the owners are very well off. And you do have the Hewlett Packard CEO, if I'm not mistaken, part of that ownership group. Indy 11 have a successful, not just on the pitch, but off the pitch. And for the NASL, it's something that's not necessarily very common in the last few years. And last year, in 2016, one of the only franchise in that league to be successful off and on the pitch, literally the most successful on the pitch. But because of those reasons, Indy 11 is a better bid than we give them credit for. They were not expected, but because of the potential of having that stadium and close to Lucas Oil Field, which is one of the biggest and best stadium in the entire country, over 100,000 capacity, which if there's a crazy, stupid big game, they can probably go over there and do it. Outside of that, they can have their soccer-specific stadium that is built to be maybe year-round. If you have it closed, it could be a great opportunity for Indianapolis to establish themselves not only in the National Football League, but with a top-tier club in another sports in North America, which is not the case right now.
Yeah, look, the success of the 11 is the con or the pro here. The con is there are markets that are more desirable from a TV perspective, much more desirable from a TV perspective out there. And then you're getting into the straight business discussions about this. When we talked to Peter Wilt about this a couple years ago, we talked to Andrew Retz about it a couple times. So a fan perspective and an owner perspective, they both sort of indicated they felt Indy was too small of a market for Major League Soccer. So I think what's happening here is that they're looking at all these cities, and particularly the one that we're going to talk about next in Cincinnati, coming into the fore and going, you know what, well, why can't we be big enough? If they're big enough, then we are. And they're sort of throwing the bid together. And that's why I don't necessarily think that this is a bid that's ready to go for the first two, but it might be ready to go for the next two because of the success of the team. It depends on how much Major League Soccer values that. And as we're seeing with Sacramento, I'm not entirely convinced that they put as much value on it as maybe they should, and certainly that we think they do. So I'm just not sure about this bid in terms of that. I do sort of think that it would be a great addition in terms of the success. I think it would be immediately very successful, and I think that Major League Soccer would be in their best interest to try and look more at the success that's going on, already happening at lower levels to advance those teams up rather than sort of just look for markets and plug teams in like they have been. Then again, I look at Atlanta and maybe I'm wrong. So that's the situation that we're looking at here. In terms of a percentage, Kevin, I'm going to give them an equal percentage less for the first one, as I said. So I'd say it's something like 5% for the first round of these bids. I think it's just too quick and too soon. But maybe if you go up for that second four, and certainly after that, it's going to be higher if they do expand up to 28-32. Put it maybe at 15% for that one. I think that's unfair to the fans of Indy because I think that they've proven to be quite good and would be valuable additions, but I think that's the reality of it.
go with a 45% for me for Indianapolis, just because of the track records that they do have, the financial viability as well that this potential owner group does have. Those reasons for me are very important, and the stadium plan could be very interesting. So for those reasons, 45% for Indianapolis.
All right. Let's move just a little bit down the road there to Cincinnati. This is, of course, the Johnny-come-lately, really, of the American soccer scene with the massive crowds that we saw last year with Cincinnati. We had conversations there on our USL Wednesdays. It certainly was the most interesting story, I think, in USL, the success of that club. That club's success was largely based on the promise that they would get into the MLS expansion right away. That, to me, is both the pro and the con when you're talking about Cincinnati, is they did show that they would show up in big numbers to watch D3 at the time soccer. But it was always with that hanging over their heads that we're going to come out and we're going to show them that we can have a Major League Soccer team, which I think that speaks well to the league, that fans are willing to come out and really support to try and get a Major League Soccer team nowadays. There was a time when they might not have cared, but they do now. But what happens if they don't get one of those first two teams, Cincinnati? Do those crowds dip? Is there enough of a track record in that market? And certainly the track record in that market that does exist isn't particularly great. They've lost teams before. They've had very poorly attended, very poorly supported teams in the past. So if there is disappointment here, does that momentum continue on for the next two bid? And certainly if they don't get one of the next four, does it continue on for 5, 6, 7 more years until we're talking about those further expansions? And we all know the league's going further.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, for me, Duane, if you're looking at the ownership is Carl H. Linder III and the Linder family, co-CEO of American Financial Group. But they have a lot of presence in Cincinnati, a very strong backbone, if you want to use those terms to describe their wealth. And so that's not a problem. This is no concern at all. The ownership group, you check the little box and they're good to go. The stadium, though, they currently play at the University of Cincinnati's Nippert Stadium. It's okay for USL, big crowds, big atmosphere, but it's not soccer specific in the way that you want your stadium to be in Major League Soccer. They do have some potential sites in mind, but they're currently narrowing the list, so it's still up for grabs, the stadium situation. So that's a little con. But Cincinnati, if you want to start, example, the viability of starting a franchise right now in the next 2 to 4 years with this expansion around, it might have a go. For those reasons, I think Cincinnati, for me, has a 60% chance of having, so a 60% on that grade here on that bid, to be one of those first four.
Yeah, certainly, especially when you get into the Midwest question, which they've identified the Midwest as an area that they need to grow in. And I do think that one of those teams, we're going to get into our predictions of the four, that one of those cluster teams in the Midwest are going to find their way into the league in the first round of expansion. I'll get there in a minute, but nonetheless, that's probably a big reason that's driving so many bids in the Midwest as well, because I'm sure Major League Soccer has let them know that. I wouldn't put it that high. I think that, and I'll get to, just in a very short moment, I'll get to the reason why I wouldn't put it that high, but I'll put it at 1/3. I'll put them at 33% for a first two and maybe 50% for the second four if they do the double expansion in the Midwest. So that's where I'm at with Cincinnati. All right, let's move just a little tiny bit more east to a city that I'm well familiar with, that anyone that's grown up where I have has been there many times before, and that is, of course, the city of Windsor North, or Detroit, as some of the Americans like to call it.
I like Detroit's bet, Duane. I like it a lot. I think if you're looking at the map and you're looking at where you can put a team that doesn't have a lot of team right now, Detroit checks the boxes. If you're looking at what socially Major League Soccer can bring to Detroit, that checks the boxes. If you're looking at what a new team, it would be invigorating for the city to have that type of new thing coming. And yes, the history with Detroit FC in lower leagues, it's okay, but it's not that great. But for me, look at the ownership group. Dan Gilbert, owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers, founder and chairman of Quicken Loans Incorporated, which is big in Cleveland, but might be big in Detroit with this. Tom Gores, owner of the Detroit Pistons, chairman and CEO of Platinum Equity. The ownership group can be the best in the damn league with those two. They're proposing $1 billion development at the Wayne County jail site that will include a 23,000 seat stadium at a cost of $250 million. They're ready to do this. It would be great for the region, great for Detroit for that building and construction, the amount of jobs created for this, the amount of influx of money to the city. I think Detroit for me is a lot sexier than people think so. For me, Detroit, Duane, with the whomping 80% chance of being in those four because of the Planet Stadium. It's all mapped out, and the ownership group, and the potential of having MLS go into Detroit, which is a big sports city, with their team in MLS.
Yeah, look, we've talked about Detroit a few times here now. I'm not going to hide what I think about that market. I think it's there's no such thing as a slam dunk in this expansion, because all these have questions. I mean, there are questions about how quickly they can get something built there, I think. But if they can answer even half of those questions, I think that they're a pretty solid bid to be considered pretty quickly. I'm going to go even higher than you. I'm going to put them at close to 90% to get in one of the next four. In terms of the first two, maybe a little lower, maybe 85%, 85%. But this is because of the ownership, because of the money behind it, because of the market, one of the better bids that's out there. All right, let's move down way south to the next most easternly bid, which would be Tampa St. Pete. Tampa St. Pete is obviously an established team. They have the established name. I think that history and that name means a little bit, not as much as maybe they hope, but a little bit. Certainly having a natural rival, a close rival beyond Atlanta, because it's not really drivable between Orlando and Atlanta, guys. I don't know if you know the geography down there, but
Tampa's closer to Miami, which won't have a team. But
yeah.
When we talk about Tampa, the hashtag MLS to St. Pete, you're in Toronto. I'm in Montreal, and we have heard about that bid on Times Square with first the publicity, and then you had the mascot going to Times Square, having the marketing, the drive, the getting together of the community of Tampa, St. Petersburg to get behind this bid and make it a potential. With the big selling point is their grass too, because they sent grass as MLS. Their presentation package was wrapped in turf as actual grass on the cover. Those type of situation. Those type of situation is very important when you get the community behind. Even if the market is not considered the biggest, you do have the potential with the more suburbs aspect to it to draw a lot of potential if you brand it Tampa St. Petersburg, or if you find a way to make it inclusive and not just exclusive to either Tampa or St. Pete. You can drive a lot of fans to that area. Just look at the Tampa Bay Lightning success in NHL, in a sport on ice, the one thing that Tampa doesn't have, and it is successful because of, yes, good and winning season with the cup, but because of the way it is managed now and the way Stars and the Cavalier, all that made it successful. I think you do have the possibility to do the same in Major League Soccer. The getting together of the community is important here. You do have a track record of a well-run good as you can. Like, it was not necessarily run perfectly, but it was run enough that it stayed afloat in a very murky situation for the last few decades in lower division soccer. So you have those pros. So for those reasons, for me, Tampa is equivalent to Detroit, and I give Tampa St. Petersburg 80% to be one of those four teams.
Yeah, look, I give them a very high percentage as well. I just think that the cons. I'll go with the cons on that. First off, you mentioned the Lightning, and they have had some success there in terms of attracting fans to a sport that's not really normal there. Certainly it wouldn't be at all. It's not a natural sport there. You can't really play shinny in Tampa. However, they've done pretty well there. Now, that said, you look at the Rays, or the Devil Rays, as I prefer to still call them, because they're in the Blue Jays divisions, and they're devilish, and they always beat the Blue Jays up. They haven't really drawn there. So that's a summer sport, and that one makes it a little bit more difficult for me to see the Rowdies being all that successful in terms of drawing, because the weather down there in the summer is unbearable. If you've ever been in Florida in August, leave. That's what my suggestion would be to you. It makes our winters look like a cakewalk, but at any rate, nonetheless, that is the con against it. No, they would have to. They have kind of an old stadium, an old infrastructure stadium. You talked about Phoenix and sort of their plans to climate control their situation. Tampa doesn't have similar plans, and I think that the climate is a little hotter in Phoenix, but it's a drier heat there. The humidity in Tampa in the summer. I mean, I get that they do it in Orlando, but I don't know. Do you want another team down there? We'll see. It's very close to Orlando as well. You're talking about an hour or so drive. So is that going to hurt them? I don't know. But that said, those are the cons. I'm putting them out there for the sake of argument. I do think that it's a very solid bid. I put it very similar to yours, maybe a little lower. I'll put them around 66% for the first two, maybe 75 for the next two after that. That's what I think about Tampa. Now let's move. There's two more to go in this, and they're probably, we're getting into the long shot bids really. And I think I mentioned what the biggest long shot, or what I think the biggest long shot of all is Charlotte. Not much known about this. Marcus Smith's the name of the entrepreneur behind it. Again, this is a pretty bare bones bid right now in terms of the public knowledge of it. It's not in a city that's had particularly good success with professional sports teams in the past. It's not the biggest market. I'll just go give you a percentage right now. I'll give Charlotte a 1% chance. They seem like the longest shot of all.
I give him a 10%, but you're right. It's not the biggest bid. And when you have two bids in the same state here, we're talking about North Carolina FC with Steve Malik and Raleigh-Durham. We'll talk about this right after. And when you talk about two bids of the same region that both would answer the need of having somebody in the south and the north side, the northern part of the south, but still close enough to be considered the south in North Carolina. If you want a team there, you have a choice between Charlotte and Raleigh-Durham. Yeah, you do have a choice between those two, but even Raleigh-Durham hasn't been really successful with their top flight sports team. Look at the Hurricanes. So when you're looking at Charlotte possibilities, I do feel it's a 10%. They did have some success with the Independents and under other branded name in the lower division when it was a Christian association, and now it's a little different now. The success is not as high. There was some trouble in Charlotte the last few years with the Independents as well, but there is some history of soccer in that region. But for the four, like, they're really not the next four. I don't think they're a sexy market. Maybe eventually, if Raleigh-Durham doesn't fall through as well, it might have more of a shot. But yeah, it's the lowest for me so far, 10%.
Yeah, look, it's this is in a market that I'm going to need to talk to someone about a little bit more for me to feel better about it, because right now I just don't know enough about it, and what I do know about Charlotte is almost entirely not negative, but just not positive. That makes it's not negative, it's just not positive. That's my perception on Charlotte as a sports market right now, which brings us to our final market, which, as you said, is Raleigh. Look, this is the advantage. They're both similar in the sense that they seem like long shots, but at least in Raleigh, they have a team already that they can sort of piggyback on. That, I think, gives them a little bit of a higher percentage of a chance, and it's almost what drives Charlotte so low to me is the fact that they have another regional bid that is much better in my mind. So that's the pros of it, that they have the piggybacked team that they can place things on. Although it's a team that's playing in NASL as opposed to USL, so that's going to be less of a cooperation thing than Tampa, perhaps. But that's where I'll go with that. In terms of the cons, they're similar to Charlotte. It's not a particularly successful professional sports market. It's a successful college sports market. It doesn't really have much meat on the bid, other than the fact that it's got this team attached to it, but it is better than Charlotte, which is its biggest pro.
Yeah, that's exactly. It's better than Charlotte, but compared to other, it's not necessarily the same. You do have Steve Malik, chairman and owner of North Carolina FC, behind it. He has identified 3 potential sites in hopes of building a 20,000 seat stadium, though he hopes to narrow that down in the next 2 weeks, as his final site, but it's still some questioning behind it. The era has some roots in the game. We talked about it, having the NASL side that's been around since 2006 as the Railhawks, but now it will be interesting to see how they attract people with the new branding this season, how this goes away in the NASL, and how they do financially as well. And if they can prove themselves, maybe that bid will have more meat on the bone, like you mentioned. But for now, I do feel it's better than Charlotte, but kind of barely. So I will give them a 15%.
Yeah, I'm going to go 5% because I gave Charlotte 1%. And I'll say it's maybe 10% for the second round. All right, let's get into the meat of this. So there are two.
So I made the calculation here, Duane. So I'll do the same for yours. So you go ahead and I'll calculate. I'll check on your side if which one will you have with the notes we gave.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily keeping track of my percentage.
I was.
All right, fair enough. In the first start, we'll do it the 2 rounds. So in the first 2 rounds, I'll start. This is what I think the first 2 rounds of expansion will be. I believe that MLS will award expansion franchises to, drumroll please.
Wait.
San Diego.
Oh.
And Tampa in the first 2 rounds.
Okay, so San Diego and Tampa for you. For me, if it was me, and according to my stats and the grades that I've given the team, the first 2 in Major League Soccer expansion round will be Tampa and Detroit. Those 2 would be my choices in the first 2 team. And my next round, my next 2, Duane, I will go ahead. It will be Cincinnati and San Antonio. So you would have, out of the 12, my 4s will be Tampa, San Antonio, Detroit, and Cincinnati.
Fair enough. The reason that I did an East-West split is why I chose that, because of the sort of breakup of the conferences, and I still think MLS is committed to that. So that's why I avoided Detroit in the first round. I think Tampa scratches an itch for them in the Southeast, and that's why I chose them over Detroit. I do have Detroit in my next round of expansions, winning that sort of Midwest battle. I think that there's enough questions with all of those bids in the Midwest that they'll wait until the second round to bring them in. But I think it'll well be Detroit because of the market size. And similarly, I think that the second team, the 4th team, the final team in this expansion bid will be a bit of an upset for people, but not really when you think about it. I think Phoenix will get the 4th expansion franchise in this mix, which means that you're going to have Cincinnati and Sacramento, the 2 big attendance and fan-driven bids out there are going to be pushed aside, which is not going to make people happy, but that's what I think is going to play out.
All right. Very interesting. So we got our choices for the expansion.
Fair enough. And of course, we'll be wrong because that's how these things work. But Kevin, we have about 7 more minutes left in the show. So let's take a very quick break, come back with some bits and bites to end.
Bits and bites on Soccer Today.
Big fat Frank, big fat.
No, he's a super Frank, super Frankie.
Super Frank. All right, yeah, Frank Lampard retired. That's not surprising.
Nope.
Brilliant career, obviously, most well known for his time at Chelsea. Not so much for his time with the City Football Group, although he did do well in a couple stretches, both with the big city club and with the little city club.
I will always remember Frankie Lampard's size scoring a brace in Major League Soccer.
Yes, precisely. Look, there's not much to say on this. As I said, it was time for him to retire. He probably should have retired as a Chelsea player, I think, even the lone stretch at Manchester City, which had some success. And I think hindsight.
Oh, that felt so weird. As a Chelsea supporter, Duane, I just remember him playing. It's just like, why? Like, why?
I know he scored against Chelsea too.
I know. I was like, come on, man. What are you doing?
I know. That's
telling us.
Look, obviously that was the controversy in this side of the pond is what he did there. And I had a bit of a weird double perspective on it because I was watching him play for Manchester City and doing quite well for Man City actually in that stretch. So what I will say is that had he not done that and come straight to Major League Soccer and started and launched NYCFC as he was supposed to do, as he was supposed to be the face of that off the top, then I think that we might perceive his Major League Soccer adventure much differently than we did because he did have something to give at the end there. And I think he kind of, to use crude analogies, blew you know what at the end. Like And what last little bit he had, he gave it in that spell for Man City rather than for NYCFC. And he was injured and he sort of came back and he had a good stretch at the end of last year. But had he been able to do that for 2 years, I think a lot of people over here would just sort of applaud him and move on. But the way it is right now, I think a lot of fans of Major League Soccer, and particularly fans of NYCFC, have trouble getting past that initial snub in their mind. And I think that also was an indication of he was a player that didn't really want to come over here. I mean, the money was probably pretty good. The idea of New York City was probably appealing to him. But when push came to shove and he was offered the opportunity to have a little bit longer in the Premier League, he took it. And that, to me, suggested he wasn't mentally prepared to give up on playing at the highest level to go play in Major League Soccer. And as many advancements as MLS has made over the years, it's still not the highest level. And you can understand that on some level. I can even respect it on some level, but I don't respect the fact that he still did it, right? Like he should have known that about himself and just said, you know what, I'm going to go find a team at the lower levels of the Premier League and play another year. Like it's the same with the Wayne Rooney question. We have that. Like, I don't want to see Wayne Rooney in Major League Soccer. His heart wouldn't be here. He should play at Everton or Stoke or something like that to end his career. That's where he should finish it, not, half-assing it in Minnesota or something, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So, that's interesting.
All right. Couple quick points here. I wanted to talk about this Wunder kid, supposedly. I find the hype around this hilarious. Canadian Voyageurs are waking up today with a new, rallying cry, which would be Cap Marcelo Flores.
He's 13. Calm your, what?
Yeah, he's 13 years old at the Ipswich Academy. He's also he's a Cayman Islands and Canadian citizen, so I don't think he's going to represent the Cayman Islands. Although if he's in the UK long enough, he might. If he is good enough, he might go there. Look, he's 13 years old. There was an article in the Ipswich paper. There's a couple other articles. They're calling him like a wunderkind because he can do 200 keep him ups. I don't know if that's necessarily going to translate onto the soccer pitch. We'll see how this goes, but just calm your on this kid as the hype starts to go. But it is nice to hear Canadian and Wunderkid together in the same sentence. I'll give you that. Gives you a little excitement to start your day. You can read that. I'll post the link to some of his stuff out there if you're interested after. But I thought I'd get that name out there, get ahead of the curve, just like we were the head of the curve on Alphonso Davies. So, we'll be ahead of the curve on Marcelo Flores.
Performed 2,000 keep-ups without the ball bouncing and is well-known to scouts at world powers such as Barcelona, Chelsea, and Liverpool. Interesting. Yeah. Marcelo Flores, 13 years old.
Yeah, well-known to scouts. What the hell does that mean exactly? He's at Ipswich.
Yeah.
In the article, the father says, with all due respect to Canadian football, and I'm thinking to myself, you're at Ipswich, dude. Like, if you're a Barca, sure, but you're at Ipswich. Like, he's Guelph is where he's from in Canada. It's like, go to Sigma for Christ's sakes, dude. Like, that's going to be better for this kid. But you've got big eyes, Dad, and you think that this taking over there is going to be the answer. So, Godspeed. I think that there is a lesson there to make this serious for a second, that dragging a 13-year-old out of his comfort zone just because he shows a little talent, because God knows what's going to happen in the next couple of years. 13 is way too early when you have great academy options in this country now. The TFC Academy, Sigma Academy, right there within driving distance of both of them, where he could have stayed at his home. He could have continued to train at a high level with to look at Sigma for a second, with an academy with a track record of, at the very least, placing kids at top NCAA schools where he would get an education. And instead, he's going to go to Ipswich and he's going to play in that meat grinder over there. And if it works out, it does. But I can count on 17 hands the amount of Canadian kids at 13 that have gone to clubs like Ipswich and have just been forgotten about afterwards. A lot of obstacles to overcome. Just because you got a couple articles in the newspaper doesn't necessarily mean that you should be dragging him out of his comfort zones. But that's just me, Kevin.
Yeah,
right,
we talked about Alessandrini, the left midfield of the LA Galaxy a few days ago from Olympique de Marseille. It's been confirmed. So he's now with the LA Galaxy as a designated player. So is Jelle Van Damme, confirmed as well. Like we mentioned a few weeks ago, that he would be a designated player for the Galaxy. So you have your 3 DP for the LA Galaxy: Gio, Van Damme, and Alessandrini.
Yeah, the interesting thing about that is the type of DPs that they're bringing in. Gio is obviously a kind of a different level, but in the past, LA was going for the big names, right? And now they
But
seem to.
what
have
is it
taken a
for
different
Jermaine
approach.
Jones? So one of them is not a DP then. Is Jones a DP? Because we thought Jones was going to be a
Jones
DP.
is he's a Tampa player.
Tampa player, okay. Because otherwise
Yeah.
he's going to be one of those DPs. So okay. Jones is Tampa player. But
Yeah.
that's two new big names. But look at the big four for LA. Not bad at all if Jermaine Jones can stay on the right side of the injury spectrum.
Yeah. That's funny that Jermaine Jones will not be injured next year at some point. That's hopeful. Anyway, no, I agree. LA is an intriguing team for next year for sure. I don't know what's gonna happen with them necessarily. All right, couple quick points to end the show here. The Gold Cup final, Levi Stadium. So let's hope for the sake of the Gold Cup organizers that it's U.S. Mexico, because otherwise it's going to be an awfully lot of empty seats at the Gold Cup final this year, Kevin.
Yeah, it's a big place. It's a big venue. I think it's 80,000 people at least, or similar to that region in Santa Clara, Levi Stadium in the Bay Area.
Yeah, and if Mexico's not in it, they could be in trouble, which amuses me. As I joked after the fact, is that are we really sure that Panama, Canada can fill that place? Which was joking that Canada would make the Gold Cup final against Panama, which would be hilarious.
That's a good one.
Although by hilarious, I mean, we'd be weeping in the streets of the Voyageurs, but that's nonetheless, we'd be all cynical about it, but we'd be like,
yeah, we won something.
Oh yeah, I'd take this.
We would be going to the Confederations Cup, Duane. That would be awesome. Get destroyed by Brazil.
We wouldn't necessarily go to the Confederations
Cup. This year, yeah. I think is it this year?
You got a half spot in there with that CONCACAF Cup. So the winner of this Gold Cup gets one half spot in the Confederation Cup, which will take place after the conclusion of the next Gold Cup, with the winner of that playing the winner of this one for the winner of that game. The U.S. and Mexico played last year, if you recall, advancing to the Confederation Cup in 2021. So the 2017 Confederation Cup is Mexico because they beat the U.S. last summer. That's how it works. All right. Anything else on the agenda here, Kevin? Anything you want to get to?
Just Blanco from San Lorenzo signed by Portland, a big name, big player. That's where Nacho Piatti's from. I don't necessarily expect the same level of contribution that Nacho Piatti did, but very similar. So that could be a great signing by Portland.
All right, and Benoit Giroux, he officially resigned with TFC yesterday, which is a nice veteran move and the type of move that a club like TFC, when they're an inch away from the MLS Cup, teams at that level can afford to make those kind of depth veteran signings. They're key, I think, to trying to push them over the top. And I think bringing back Giroux for one final year, and I suspect it will be his final year, is an indication. Not that we really needed an indication, but it is an indication that TFC is absolutely all in and trying to get back to the pinnacle again in 2017. Kevin, on that note, this was a bit of a longer show than I anticipated, but nonetheless, we had to get through those expansion bids. As I said, we'll start to get some guests on in the days ahead to talk specifically about these cities in greater detail. Till that time, though, I'm going to let Kevin, as always, say goodbye.
For Duane Rollins, I am Kevin Laramee. You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute, myself at Kev Laramee. And until tomorrow, stay tuned to SPN for brand new shows. A new Scuderia F1 is dropping in a few minutes. Mark talks about all the latest news in Formula One. And until next time, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.